Okay, I found this story on Twitter and it was reposted by a blog that you can see on my personal page. I believe I also reposted it to Frill-Ability. It was a disability blog. It was originally posted, however, by AP News. It is a credible story. It's very, very sad. This is where we have the suicide content warning. I'm just going to read the straight article. I find it very soothing to hear things read to me. So if this is something that you enjoy, let me know. If you don't like it, either way, criticism is always good. It's entitled Tangled in Fraud Probe, Hundreds Face Loss of Disability Checks by Claire Galifaro. This is not a super recent story, but recent enough. It was published January 7th, 2017. Surprise, not surprised that we are just hearing about it. It didn't get a lot of retweets, which is why I think it's so important for us to talk about. Gosh, I mean, I can't imagine the number of people that we aren't hearing about who are losing their checks completely. But let's get right into it. This is taking place in mini Kentucky. Donna Dye saw the coal truck come barreling over the horizon and her head start spinning with that familiar, desperate urge to end it all. She thought of the disconnect notices, the engagement ring she pawned to keep the lights on, the house she loved and would probably lose. Life insurance was the only bill that was up to date. This way, she thought, it might look like an accident. Months had passed since the letter arrived from Social Security Administration. We are suspending your disability benefits, it had said. She thought of her husband, a proud man with a body broken from 26 years of mining coal, and the fights over money they never had, until now. Fraud, the agency had written, and the humiliation consumed them. She thought about veering across the yellow line and slamming head-on into that truck. They show a photo of the woman, who has longish light brown hair, white, wearing a sweater in her house, and jeans, at a dining room table standing up. In this Monday, the caption says, December 19th, 2016, Donna Dye, who is unemployed and whose husband is disabled, stands in her home in mini Kentucky. She struggles to make loan payments on their home, where she keeps the lights and heat turned down to save money. Dye and her husband have been fighting the federal government to keep his Social Security disability checks after a local lawyer who helped them became the subject of a federal fraud investigation. Let me just clear that who helped them became the subject of a federal fraud investigation. For more than a year, Dye's family and hundreds of others in the coal fields of Kentucky and West Virginia have been fighting the federal government to keep their Social Security disability checks. They have one thing in common. They hired attorney Eric C. Kahn, a flamboyant master marketer, who billed himself Mr. Social Security. For years, he clogged the highways with neon yellow billboards promising to help people get what they deserved from the government. Dye thought they could trust him. Now federal officials allege he funneled $600 million in fraudulent claims to this impoverished pocket of Appalachia, and the government has turned off the spigot. It suspended disability payments to hundreds of Kahn's former clients, propelling them into an unprecedented year-long battle with the federal government. They must prove once again that they deserved disability years ago. If they lose, their checks stop and they are billed for tens of thousands of dollars they received over the years, money the government now believes they never deserved. The government has good reason to ferret out disability fraud. Really? Critics call it a secret welfare program that morphed over the decades, from serving the truly disabled to aiding the unemployable, the uneducated, the frail, the unfortunates, who live in places where a rotting economy relies on back-breaking labor. Gosh, the wording in this is just really making me angry. Burgeoning claims. In Floyd County, Kentucky, 15% are on disability. have pushed the disability fund into the brink of insolvency. I'm sorry, I have to add commentary. I really have to. Yes, of course, there are going to be people who take advantage of the government. But instead of looking to people saying, there is this high of a rate of people on disability, gotta be fraud, do you think people would say, there's this high of people on disability, maybe we aren't taking care of our people. Maybe there's a problem with the economy not serving the disabled. I don't know. Just a thought. So we see a picture of some mountains and what looks like small houses, the prefabs, and signs, two signs, both that say Eric C. Kahn Law Complex, 1-800-232-HURT. The caption reads, "This Monday, December 19th, 2016 photo shows the law offices of Eric C. Kahn," I find it very funny that his last name is Kahn, "in Stanville, Kentucky. Many of Kahn's clients have lost their Social Security disability checks after he became the subject of a federal fraud investigation. The government has squeezed other programs for the poor, leaving many in these crumbling corners of blue-collar America with few good options. The mass suspensions laid bare their absolute dependence on disability. 3 people have killed themselves. Others caught themselves in quiet moments wondering they'd be better off dead. Donna Dye didn't crash her car into the coal truck. Instead, she pulled over to the shoulder of the road and sat for an hour, her temples pulsing with panic, her thoughts racing. Disability had been her family's safety net. Now, she thought, there was nothing to save them from flailing towards impact. It's like sitting in a tub of water, floating. Nothing's wrong, she said. And then somebody pulls the cork. You get sucked out, and everything's gone. Eric C. Kahn opened his law practice 23 years ago in a trailer in his hometown of Stanville, Kentucky, population 500. There he built the 3rd most lucrative disability firm in the nation. The nation. When the Dyes went looking for a lawyer in 2008, Kahn was everywhere. He paid young women he called Kahn's hotties to attend events across the region with his 1-800 number printed across their tank tops. He erected a 19-foot replica of the Lincoln Memorial in the parking lot of his law complex at a cost, he claimed, of $500,000. He commissioned life-sized Kahn effigies to sit atop billboards on the highways in an online ad. He bragged that he sent a local boy with terminal cancer to Disney World, and closed with a preacher's benediction, giving thanks to God for Kahn's kindness. Tim Dye hurt his back in the mines years ago, and a car wreck in 2008 aggravated his injuries. He had surgery for ruptured discs and disintegrating cartilage. He resisted applying for disability, his wife said, until it got to where he couldn't push in the clutch in his truck or bend over to tie his shoes. His application was denied. About 3/4 of applicants' initial claims are rejected, and many turn to lawyers to help them appeal. This means big money for attorneys doing disability claims in bulk. If they win on appeal, applicants are entitled to payments dating back to when they became unable to work, and lawyers get a chunk of that money, paid directly by the agency. From personal experience, this is true. Kahn racked in more than $20 million in fees. Media reports in 2011 questioned his relationship with government-employed administration law Judge David Daugherty, who approved nearly all of Kahn's clients for disability. In 2013, former U.S. Senator Tom Coburn, a Republican from Oklahoma, led an investigation into abuse of the disability program. He entitled his report, "How Some Legal, Medical, and Judicial Professionals Abused Social Security Disability Programs for the Court's Most Vulnerable, a case study of the Kahn law firm." Another photo of this guy's crazy setup. This Monday, December 19th, 2016 photo shows a sculpture of Abraham Lincoln outside the law offices of Eric C. Kahn in Stanville, Kentucky. Many of Kahn's clients have lost their Social Security disability checks after he became the subject of a federal fraud investigation. AP photo, copyrights David Stevenson. For 161 pages, it described an elaborate system in which Kahn paid doctors and Doherty to rubber stamp disability claims using phony medical evidence. Oh God, this is just so ridiculous. It just makes me so angry because all these people came in with real medical issues, needed Social Security. He took complete advantage of them. I mean, I don't even know why they needed to get phony medical evidence if they had the medical evidence to back it up. It's obscene. Years passed, Kahn was not criminally charged, and he remained in good standing with the Kentucky Bar Association. Well, all right. Donna Dye says she and her husband were unaware of any improprieties. The Social Security Administration has acknowledged there's no evidence Kahn's clients were involved in the scheme. Well, of course not. The Dyes took him their records, went to the appointments he arranged. Oh, no, okay, sorry, I got the name confused. Yeah, no, of course, Donna Dye, she would be totally innocent, I thought. It's just so ridiculous that Kahn was not criminally charged. Good God. Kentucky. Like, this is just... What is our law? Like, what is happening? The Dyes took him their records, went to the appointments he arranged, and trusted he took care of the rest. That's strange. As someone who, I got a disability attorney, and never once did my lawyer say, go to this appointment. That would be weird. But in May 2015, 11 months before Kahn was formally accused of any crime, the Social Security Administration contacted his clients. The letter said their lawyer was suspected of having colluded with a judge and their doctors to file claims using fraudulent medical evidence. It told them their benefits were suspended and gave them 10 days to collect their medical records from years before and prove once again they had been disabled. So because other people fucked up, the disabled suffer, the person getting rich off of it doesn't go to jail, and none of this makes sense to me. Local attorney Ned Pillerdorf's phone started ringing. He heard 100 letters were sent out and panicked. I feel like this guy should be sent to jail, charged a bunch of money, and all of that money that he gets fined, this lawyer, should be sent to all of the people who he hurt. And they should just be taken care of for life. He heard 100 letters were sent out and panicked. Then he heard it was several hundred, then 900. Before the scope of the chaos settled into focus, a colleague made an ominous prediction. There will be suicides, he said. Within weeks, 3 people took their own lives, including Melissa Jude, on disability for a decade for anxiety and depression. She was on her way to Pillersdorf's office when she pulled over to the side of the road and shot herself in the head. The death toll startled Republican Congressman Hal Rogers, whose district includes the hardest-hit counties of eastern Kentucky. He convinced the Social Security Administration to allow Kahn's clients to keep their checks as they struggled in a series of hearings to prove they deserved them all along. The Appalachian Research and Defense Fund, a legal aid organization in eastern Kentucky, grew so worried they recruited the largest network of volunteer attorneys since the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Now led by Pillersdorf, the band of 150 lawyers, some of the best disability attorneys in the nation, has become a sort of grassroots suicide prevention network. We are fighting for you, they tell people over and over. You are not alone against the government. Still, at least once a week, At least once a week, Pillersdorf fields a suicide threat. They plead publicly on Facebook that they want to die. They call his office. They call his home. Why live? Kevin Robertson wrote him. Robertson, a 41-year-old with an anxiety disorder, a bad back, and an 8th grade education, lost his $1,035 monthly draw. Wow. I didn't know people could get that much. He hadn't worked in a decade, and says his anxiety is so crippling he can barely leave his bedroom. He lost his house and everything in it. Jeez. I know some people killed themselves, he wrote. To be honest, Ned, I've had some crazy thoughts myself. Another man told him he's now sleeping in his pickup truck. A woman wrote that she and her children kept only their camping gear and went out to live in the woods. The stress is beginning to wear on Pillersdorf now, too. His wife begged him to go see a doctor. His colleagues worry he's coming undone. I want this nightmare to be over, he said, the frayed hems peeking from the leg of his trousers and the framed diplomas crooked on his office wall. I don't remember what life was like before this started, and I don't know if we're at the end or the beginning. Grocery stores in Floyd County, Kentucky are overrun when the disability checks arrive the first week of the month. Traffic backs up on the main drag in downtown Prestonburg, the county seat. Even the Papa John's doubles its numbers of delivery drivers. The payments pop up in an economy that struggled, then collapsed in recent years along with the coal industry. Every one of 6 working-age adults here gets a check, more than 3 times the American average. Coburn attributes that to a broken system abused by those who don't truly deserve it, yet grow dependent on government benefits. My fucking ass. They should have known better than to hire a shyster lawyer, he said, and those who didn't deserve benefits in the first place shouldn't draw another dime. Government dependency, he believes, is the first step toward tyranny. Oh! This next paragraph is, okay, so let me just, make a comment on what life is probably like for people who live in a town that was largely coal mining. I can't imagine what it's like to work in a coal mine. You're inhaling toxic fumes all day, so that's going to give you a lot of long-term effects. I'm guessing highly likely to get cancer. Back issues. You're going to be highly prone to other injuries. I'm guessing with the tools that you're working with, like heavy rocks falling on you. Oh my God, the things that could happen to you in that kind of town, doing that kind of work. Of course, not to mention being in a place where that's low income. How is this guy just talking out of his ass like this? He's talking from such a high place of privilege. So just listen to how incredulous this is. Listen to what this piece of shit's gonna say. Sorry, I usually don't swear so much on my business page, but it's just very, very wrong. Do I feel sorry for them? Yes, he said. Do they have hardships? Yes. But do they meet the qualifications for Social Security disability? Absolutely not. Here's what the law says. If you can do any job in the economy, you don't qualify for disability. Rules have to mean something, and life isn't fair. I don't think that's what that means. The disability program was not designed to be welfare. It is an insurance program. Every American worker pays a premium out of their paycheck under an agreement with the government that a percentage of their salary will be paid to them if one day they become too disabled to work. Tim Dye started working in the mines when he was 17. He thought when he hired Kahn 26 years later, he was collecting what he was due. His family grew entirely dependent on that check. His wife worked for the county government for nearly 18 years, until she was laid off in 2015. She didn't worry too much then about losing her job. Her husband's disability check came every month, around $2,200. Wow, that is a lot. Wow. It can be that much? How does that happen? It wasn't a lot for a couple with a son still in high school and 2 granddaughters living with them. Yeah. But it was stable, and they made do, and they expected life to go on the way it always had in their yellow house on the edge of a mountain. Earlier this year, her husband went to the Social Security office for his initial redetermination hearing, thinking that his inclusion on the suspension list must have been some sort of mistake. But a vocational expert told the judge Dai's back problems wouldn't prevent him from working a desk job. That is not true. They don't know how painful it is to frickin' sit for long periods. He was denied, and the check stopped coming 7 months ago. They wonder who would want to hire an old coal miner for a sit-down job with nothing more than a high school diploma, a crippled back, and an 8-year gap on his resume. In a month or two, we won't have nothing, he said. We're losing everything. The volunteer lawyers representing Khan's former clients say the deck is stacked against them. The agency is assuming fraud without having to prove to any court that any of them committed it. The Office of the Inspector General identified applications that included Khan's suspect medical evidence, but the report is confidential. No one has seen the evidence the agency relied on to determine why this particular pile of claims was assumed to be fraudulent. Citing a 1994 law, the agency is forbidding Khan's clients from using any medical evidence from the doctors alleged to have been involved in this scheme. I mean, oh, man. That's still their experience, though. If they were there, I mean, like, what are they supposed to do? They can't go back in time. Like, I wonder if another doctor could evaluate that, and it's impossible. They can't do anything. Pillersdorf said many of his clients were on disability for mental illness and cognitive disabilities. Now they are expected to recall the names of the other doctors they saw 10 years ago and pray they still have the records. The system really is not getting this. Do they understand the definition of a mental illness and a cognitive disability? There are going to be memory issues. They can't go back to original files they handed over to their lawyer. I didn't know that our legal system, our government, was like just allowed to make up rules as they went along. Khan is alleged to have destroyed millions of pages of documents. It's like someone does an illegal thing and then the government is also allowed to do things that feel illegal, that are just totally inhumane. Coburn's investigation found that he shredded... It's like, so, sorry, I can't get past this without... So these laws are put into place to supposedly protect us, but in the process of it, they, attempting to, like, fight it, they hurt us even more. It's like you're not really righting the wrong that happened. You're just making it worse. Like, put the guy in prison and still help the people. Just reevaluate them. Have them see other doctors, make sure they are disabled, but continue to help people. I don't know. Like, it just feels really, really wrong to me. Like, if you've been helping them for, like, sending them out checks for 10 years, 6 months more, like, how the processing time, I don't really think it's going to make that much of a difference. Khan is alleged to have destroyed millions of pages of documents. Coburn's investigation found that he shredded 26,000 pounds of paper when the Senate started to investigate. His former employees testified he burned mourned a bonfire behind his office that grew so big it smoldered for 4 days. He was charged with 18 crimes, including mail fraud, wire fraud, destruction of records, money laundering, making false statements, and conspiracy. Khan's attorneys did not respond to calls requesting an interview. He was released on bond, pending trial and scheduled for next summer. Next summer. So this guy just gets to be free, walk around, do whatever he wants. His bail was secured by his $1.5 million estate in Pikeville. So he's doing fine, while everyone else suffers. Of the hundreds of his clients initially suspended, about half have won their cases. Alright, that's still 50% question mark. The other half, including the dies, were cut off. Jeez. Their cases are entangled now in a series of lawsuits in federal court. At least one judge agreed that the procedure is unfair. U.S. District Judge Amul Thapar, on President-elect Donald Trump's short list for the U.S. Supreme Court, issued an opinion last month that found a number of Khan's clients were afforded fewer protections than suspected terrorists and ordered the Social Security Administration to reconsider its process. But another federal judge sided with the agency. The question will now likely be settled by a federal appeals court. The agency declined to talk about the process. In the meantime, many of those who lost are living with no income. The Dyes couldn't pay the water bill, so Donna Dye designed a system of hoses and barrels to collect runoff from the hills that juts up behind her house. The old-fashioned mountain way, she says. Then a man came to switch off the lights. He gave her enough time to get to the pawn shop, cash in her engagement ring, and pay the bill. She signed up for food stamps, but her husband is too proud to spend them. To him, disability was earned. Food stamps are welfare. She had hoped to find a job that paid almost as much as she made with the county, $12.45 an hour. She's 49 years old, with only a GED. They live in rural Floyd County, 23 miles from the county seat, and just putting gas in their old truck to get to and from town eats up a couple hours minimum wage work. But she gave up and put in 40 applications, from the dollar store to cleaning rooms at a cheap motel. She posted advertisements all over town, offering babysitting or house cleaning for $10 an hour. She had no takers. They raised their kids in a hollow nearby in a rickety 2-bedroom house with no heat. When Tim was still working about 10 years ago, they bought this bigger place for $85,000 and thought it meant they'd made it into the middle class. She said it was one of the happiest days of her life, and she went out and got the big dining room table she always wanted, with 8 chairs so she could have the whole family over for dinners. The mortgage got behind by 3 months. The bank called to collect, and she panicked. She put a sign in her yard. Open house, everything must go. Her neighbors picked through her belongings. She sold her couch, her dishes, and every television they owned. A woman offered her $20 each for 5 of her 8 dining room chairs. This has been pure hell. Worry, just worry, that's all I do, she said, and slumped into one of the chairs she has left. I'm almost out of stuff to pawn. Most people, even Khan's former clients, believe fraud is rampant in the disability system. They point to a distant relative or a man down the street who seems healthy and able to work but still draws a check. Pillersdorf calls them fakers, people knowingly gaming the system, and said he hasn't met one in his stack of Khan's former clients yet. The reality is much more complicated. The very definition of disability is open for debate. Mental illness is hard to measure. Pain is impossible to see. Plus, I'm just going to repeat that. The very definition of disability is open for debate. Mental illness is hard to measure. Pain is impossible to see. There is no medical condition called disability, said David Autor, an economics professor at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. You can't go to a doctor and have them say, "I've got bad news for you, son, you've got a disability." Disability is a social construct. It's how much we want you to be suffering before you shouldn't have to work. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know that I believe it's a social construct completely. But I appreciate the last half of that sentence. It's how much we want you to be suffering before you shouldn't have to work. Because, gosh, there's a word that I always forget. But I kind of believe that there is a difference between disability and chronic illness. And some people are both. Some people are one or the other. I think this is a conversation for a different point in time. But I think sometimes, people's pain can't be measured at all. But you can measure things by, like, how much something debilitates your life. Like, you can count, okay, like, on average, like, how many days of the week can I get out of the house unassisted? How many days of the week could I get out assisted? And, whether that's because of mental things or physical things, doesn't matter. Physically, how many steps can I take before X happens? Those kind of things. Those kind of things that you can measure. And those are the kind of things that will prevent you from working. Will, physically prevent you from working. If you have a panic attack, you physically cannot work. Like, that's something that will not allow you to do your job. And that is part of mental illness. So, I don't believe disability is a social construct. I believe people put social constructs around disability. And that there are a lot of people who could work more or at all, and society makes it impossible for us to work. But the value that we put on work is so impossible, because there are some of us who cannot work at all, or some days cannot work. And that's fine. But the society that we live in is just totally inflexible, and no one can most people can't wrap their heads around that. Sorry, continuing on. The nature of disability has evolved since its inception. What? Okay, this isn't correct. The nature of disability has evolved since its, quotes, inception in the 1950s, because disabled people didn't exist before then, when it was designed to support people with severe physical limitations. Oh my god. All right. Blindness, paralysis, heart disease. Yep. I have opinions. The program rapidly expanded. Okay, so they're talking about the program of disability. Okay. They should have been more specific. Come on, AP. The program rapidly expanded in the 1970s, and the federal government clamped down and kicked nearly 500,000 people off the rolls. But it backfired. The public was incensed at the thought of suffering people cut off. Well, things have changed. Congress in 1984 responded by writing a more generous definition of disability, which required that the agency consider pain, mental illness, and combinations of less serious, in awarding disability. The number of Americans in the program has skyrocketed since, from 1.8 million people in 1970 to more than 10 million people today. Population? Do we take population into consideration? Only some of which can be attributed to aging baby boomers and more women in the workforce. Okay, so here's like this connection to work again. Because of course, like if women weren't working, why would they deserve a living wage? Right? Right? Because they would just be attached to men and then the men could, give them money. Ah! Just gag me with the spoon. Nationwide, 4.7% of Americans rely on Social Security disability, but in some pockets that number is far higher. Autor calls it the disability belt, a swath across the South and Appalachia, where levels of education are among the lowest in the nation, and jobs in mining or manufacturing have disappeared. I wonder why they disappeared. I wonder why. Dan Black, an economist, and I don't know, maybe they're like freaking harmful to the body, terrible conditions. Dan Black, an economist at University of Chicago, studied how the rate of disability shot up when the coal industry declined. Please tell me they see the obvious reason why. He pointed to a system tied more to economics and physical appearance. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. He doesn't believe it translates to fraud. Okay. Sometimes smart people can be not so bright. Okay, let's think about the rate of disability shooting up when the coal industry declined. So all the people who used to be in the coal industry, all of that awful shit finally hit their body, started to hit their body. They became disabled. It had nothing to do, it had probably less to do, we'll say, with the economics of it. They probably, I would see one aspect of economics where they didn't have access to health care. As in, coal mining broke their bodies. Manufacturing broke their bodies. We can talk about like the economics of the coal industry not providing proper conditions, not taking care of their health. There is an economic aspect to that. I'm not sure what we mean by fraud, he said. Obviously, it's fraud if I have no health problems that prevent me from working. But there are big gray areas in between. If I have significant pain in my back, is that enough to keep me from working? Maybe, but maybe not. It's really funny when able people talk about disability. It's a very difficult line to draw. Black has a colleague who uses a wheelchair. If he were a coal miner, he would be disabled. Ah! You can be disabled and work. But he has advanced degrees and works as economist at a university. So, I guess he's not disabled. Oh my god. Can we just... I'm having a hard time getting through this. The very definition of disability is inherently tied to education. What? What? Oh, no, no, no. Make it stop. The very definition of disability is inherently tied to education and skill and the labor market. Oh, okay, so everyone out there who didn't get a college degree, is unskilled, and is not actively employed, guess what? You have a pre-existing condition and you're now disabled. Congratulations. Join the club. I can't believe that. I really can't believe it. But his friend in a wheelchair, because he's educated and has a job, not disabled. Who are these people? AP, retract. Issue an apology, please. Oh, Americans have tasked administrative law judges employed by the Social Security Administration with choosing who deserves disability and who does not. Yep, the stakes are high. A tiny fraction of those who enter the disability program ever leave it, for a job, said David Stapleton, who runs the Mathematica Center for Studying Disability Policy. It's like a zoo for able people. It's like they put little cameras out and study us. The government spends an average of $300,000 in lifetime benefits for each person in the system. The disability fund is going broke. Congress routed money last year. If it's going, maybe they should think about how the government spends money otherwise. Just a thought. Congress routed money last year from the retirement fund into the disability fund, a move he likened to robbing Peter to pay Paul when Peter's already in trouble. I bet they thought that was a pretty wise crack. But the solution, he said, is to work with people on the front end to keep them in the workforce, not kick them off after they've been out of the labor market for too many years to be reasonably expected to return to it. Just throwing them off the rolls without considering what that means for them, he said, seems pretty irresponsible. Donna Dye looked in the mirror not long ago and was stunned by the bags under her eyes, the frayed edges of her long curly ponytail. Do you find it interesting that, the husband isn't featured at all? That he doesn't speak? Just a year ago, she would have never left the house without fixing her hair and putting on lipstick. Somewhere along the way, she thought, she had run out of pride. She doesn't know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was on one of the trips to the pawn shop. Maybe when her mother gave her all she could. 4 piggy banks labeled quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies, and she took them. She told herself to accept it, resigned to a life of poverty, and moved back to that rickety old house in the hollow with no heat because she couldn't stand the stress of caring anymore. I couldn't remember, is Donna also disabled? Because I know the husband was for sure. Because it seems to focus around Donna. She fixates now on the dents in the drywall, the peeling paint. How about your husband? Your disabled husband? The cracks in the concrete porch. She trained herself to hate this house she loved so much. She will not weep when the bank comes to take it away. I wonder if Associated Press writer Mike Schneider is disabled. Doesn't sound like it. Well, it really did bring light to an important issue, not in the way that I would have liked towards the end there. That went in a weird direction for me. Really weird direction. I hope some of you out there kind of see what I mean. Let's move on to something shorter. That was a really long one. And to something happier, I think. It is from spectrumnews.org. I am so far, I think I'm going to really like this website. It's called Spectrum News, like I said. And this article just came out today, so hopefully you haven't read it. It is called Untold Stories of Adults with Autism. Most of the conversation about autism, whether about services or science, concerns children with the condition. But what happens when children with autism grow up? That's the focus of this special report, Untold Stories of Adults with Autism. The report covers issues that affect a majority of adults with the condition, as well as issues that touch just a few. We made an effort to feature the perspectives of not just scientists, but the true experts, people with autism. I prefer to say autistic people. We'll continue on. Thanks to whoever just tuned in. Welcome. So this is called Spectrum News. They're using person first language. Maybe it'll improve. Many children fall off a social cliff after leaving high school and becoming adults, as journalist Deborah Rudisiel describes in the 20-something freefall. But a few manage to do well. Those who fare best are the ones who participated in organized activities as students, writes Julie Lowndes Taylor. Some of the social difficulties people with autism, autistic people, face stem from the lack of eye contact. Well, just LJ's note. So again, like hashtag not all autistic people. Like that is definitely a thing that some autistic people have issues with, but not all of us. Craig Erickson and Rebecca Schaffer, don't know, explore whether autistic adults, my edit, are uninterested in others' eyes or actively avoid them. This really doesn't feel like it's coming from the perspective of an autistic person, and is making me kind of uncomfortable. The answer may help shape therapies for the condition. Artist Leorenica Hawkins, who is autistic, depicts her occasional aversion to eye contact in a series of evocative cartoons. Another artist on the spectrum, Nicole Apple, creates unconventional portraits that have appeared in prominent art shows. For Brooks Wolfner, a young man on the spectrum, a job training program has led to stable employment and an entree to social life. Brooks lives with family, but when his grandmother is in Florida, he is by himself, adhering to a strict schedule that gets him to work by 6 a.m. Housing can be more complicated for others on the spectrum. This is something that I feel is really important to talk about. And states are increasingly refusing to pay for disabled adults to live in large residential communities. Yes, designed for them. This is huge. Amy S.F. Lutz reports that these communities are a particularly good option for those who need extensive support. This is such a big issue because there is like the whole there's a big debate going on about nursing homes, and I don't think people realize a residential community is different than a nursing home. A nursing home is for people who basically they need hospital care. They aren't independent for the most part. A residential community is for someone who needs some help but can do like some things on their own. And that's so it would be it's really, really difficult. Like I went through a period and I'd still really like to find something like a residential community, but Social Security doesn't cover them. And you have to have a lot of money to get into one, or your family does, and they are more expensive than an apartment. Like you're looking at like several $1,000s, upwards of that every month. So, yeah. For most people with autism, for most autistic people, isolation is unwelcome. Liz Pelicano and Felicity Sedgwick describe the difficulties autistic women. I shout a little bit like that every time because I'm trying to, like the person first language is not ideal. So I'm just making the edit in that particular instance. The difficulties autistic women have making friends because they struggle to interpret the subtle social cues that form the glue of female friendships. This is really true. And just any friendships, not female friendships of any gender. There is this stereotype that autistic people just won't get like the really basic things like idioms, and it's really not just that. It's things that you wouldn't get, it's really hard to describe, and I guess this is sort of part of it because, for example, when I was getting diagnosed, the person diagnosing me, the psychiatrist, was like, "Oh, describe this emotion." And I always thought I was like this metaphorical person and could go into great lengths about things, but I sat there and I had no idea how to talk about it. I'm like, oh, I was totally speechless. Anyway, We may be able to, for example, some of us are just very, very empathetic. A lot of us are extremely empathetic. We feel too deeply. A person can walk into the room and we just like, we know that it's a bad feeling or a good feeling. But for example, with me, I'll get really confused because maybe like a person's words won't match with like what their face is doing, or just like the vibe that I get from them. And so then I don't know if I should be taking like their words at face value. I'm not sure like how to interact with them, and that leads to arguments, and generally how I interact might be considered strange, and I don't know how to make it normal. And I've had this interacting with other autistic people online, talking about these kind of issues. It's a very resounding experience of similarity. Continuing on, people with autism may similarly find romantic relationships challenging. In Sex and Other Foreign Words, reporter Anne Griswold describes the complications that make sex and romance difficult for those on the spectrum, and the sweet success many have found. This is the first generation of people with autism who have a diagnosis and are choosing to become parents. Is that true? I mean, I'm pretty sure who have a diagnosis, I don't know, maybe. Although raising children poses its own set of problems for any parent, many are finding the unexpected plus of parenting with autism. One pitfall of parenting on the spectrum can be an inability to respond appropriately to a child's emotions. Nathan Karuna and John Brock discuss technology that brings a better understanding of social cognition in adults who are autistic, and the promise of virtual reality for helping these individuals hone social skills. Autistic adults often have multiple health conditions. At a few healthcare centers designed for this population, specialists coordinate their care to consider all of an individual's health issues before deciding on treatment. In other cases, the healthcare of adults who are autistic is compromised by a late-in-life diagnosis. Judith Miller suggests potential ways to uncover cases of autism that go undiagnosed in community health centers. You can hear some of these voices in our Spectrum Stories podcast below. Articles from our archives are round out at this special report, which we hope captures some of the experience of being an autistic adult. So that was kind of interesting. I'm a little curious about, I'm happy that they made that an audience. But it felt like it definitely wasn't written by autistic people. I'd like to investigate this website a little bit more. I get a feeling this is maybe written by someone in the psychological sciences. It says, our mission: we provide comprehensive news and analysis of advances in autism research. Through our work, we hope to catalyze new collaborations and perspectives on autism. We sift through the steady stream of autism papers and highlight the most noteworthy. Okay. So this isn't really like a voice of the autistic neurodivergent community. I kind of wonder what kind of side of things that they're on. I'll look into it more. And maybe let you know if this is a good place or not. Anyway. gosh, I have such mixed feelings about that first article. But at the very least, it does highlight such a sad, sad problem that is aware that, people are suffering. We know it's been happening because it's happened to us. And it did say one thing, that in all of those people, they were aware that no one was faking. No one was faking. And gosh, it is refreshing to hear that. But I wish that the able community really understood what disability meant. I feel like this writer was trying, but just because, your disabled friend is at work and educated, he's still disabled. He's still disabled. An uneducated person who cannot work might not be disabled. Like, goodness, like we really need to break down the stigma we have about people. Like, someone who didn't go to college, like, can make something of themselves. There's just so much to unpack here. Well, I hope that you enjoy what I'm trying to do here with disability news, and that it's something that you want to hear more of, because there's so much that's happening within our community that we need to speak out about. If you have something to say, if you want your voice heard, leave it in the comments. If there's a story that you want me to talk about, leave that in the comments, put it in my inbox. One thing's for sure is that we can't stop speaking out. It is so, so important, because that's how we make effective change. If we're silent, if we keep our thoughts in our head, it's never going to get out into the ether. We have to keep shouting and shouting and shouting. Even, people are going to think that we're annoying. People are going to think our problems are non-problems. But they're not the ones that matter. They could die thinking that we're still awful or problematic, but they're jerks. And I could say forget about them, but we're not going to forget about them. They're going to leave a big hurt in our hearts. And I think the best thing that we can do is try our best to surround ourselves with goodness. Surround ourselves with goodness, with good people, with animals, with, cats, dogs, whatever, with a good environment, and to never stop trying to make things okay for yourself in some way, even when it feels like it's just awful, Well, I'm sending you lots and lots of love and light, and I hope that you can get some rest today if your symptoms suck. And if your symptoms aren't as bad, I hope that you can do something kind of fun. Okay. Love you. Bye-bye.